This video was brought to you by the wonderful people on screen here who support me over at Patreon. If you want to support this channel and what I do, then please check the link in the description or the link at the end of the video. Alrighty, so religion and politics are both very hot-button issues, and there's always going to be people who are incredibly contentious on both sides. So, what happens when you mix the two? Apparently 400,000 subscribers. It seems like packing up my left-wing atheist bags and starting to hop on the right-wing Christian train would be the best way to keep the lights on. Nah, I'm not gonna do that to you guys. Let's roll the intro. Alrighty, today we've got a video called Rediscovering Faith from Computing Forever, but before we get into that, fan art as usual. First, we have one thick magical girl Suris from Bumblin' Bee, Raziel and Gaelic Knox trying out outfits by Chloree, and then finally this one from Disco Scone that reimagines us in the Steven universe. Alrighty, let's hit play on that video.
I've waited a long time to make this video, mainly because I have no idea how people are going to react to it. As you know, I cover a lot of dark and tough subjects on this channel.
Oh yeah, me too. I literally just had an entire live stream dealing with somebody who wanted to make an apologetics case for child marriage. That went into some pretty dark territory. Link to that will be in the description below.
The fall of the Western world and the fate of humanity type stuff.
Fall of the Western world? That sounds kinda great replacement-y. I'm gonna hope you don't talk about that particular rabbit hole. Let's move on.
And through it all, simply calling out how bad things are or how crazy they've become can get repetitive unless a solution can be offered, unless there's a pathway to suggest to people. We all need hope and to believe in a better world.
Okay, I'm following you so far. I do everything in my power to work towards a better world, so what do you have?
And I hope this video explains not only my own journey towards an emerging spirituality, as well as some reason for optimism, but also offers a clear explanation of how we can overcome the existential threats facing our nations.
Okay, you're starting to go down the spirituality route. There's nothing inherently wrong with being spiritual, although the definition will vary literally person to person. But what's this about external threats to nations?
It seems now that a pattern is beginning to emerge among many of us who operate in this genre of red pill philosophy. When you take the metaphorical red pill, it's just the first epiphany, the first layer. You realize how much you've been lied to all your life. You discover that you've been fed an ideology perpetuated through biased narratives and spin.
Yes, you're literally describing exactly why I stopped being a young Earth creationist.
You begin to discern truth from illusion and reject the programming that they attempted to indoctrinate you with. Now, if the red pill is the means by which you discover that you've been lied to, the black pill is how you learn just how dangerous those lies truly were. The black pill is where you descend down the rabbit hole further and learn just how bad things have become.
Yeah, kinda like dealing with the NIFB after dealing with kooks like Ken Ham. It's only kooky young Earth creationism until it forms an entire cult that is centered around genocide and the idea of trying to proliferate it. But I have a feeling that my inferences on what you're saying are kind of wrong. I feel like you're speaking in incredibly vague platitudes, which means I'm able to walk down my own path mentally with this, slowly nodding my head.
It's where the consequences of evil become truly apparent. It's also the point where you begin to experience a degree of hopelessness and despondence. This is the point of rock bottom. But luckily from there, the only way is up. Things can seem bleak, but it's virtually impossible to stay black-pilled for long. It's simply too difficult to entertain nihilism or despair for extended periods of time.
Yes, it's almost as if it's not useful to entertain nihilism for extended periods of time in the way that you're describing. My answer to that was pragmatism.
Eventually, an appetite for hope, optimism, and meaning begins to develop. The soul requires nourishment. Enter the white pill, also known as the God pill. You begin to desire action, order, purpose, and a semblance of values in your life. The world may be going crazy, but you're not going to.
Wait. You're telling me that you, in your hope and despair, desperately need to cling to something, whether or not that thing is true, and so you immediately will cling to a religion. Anybody who watches my channel knows that I don't have an issue with people being religious. I do think, however, that in the way you're arguing, you are using religion as a crutch, and when you start using it as a crutch in this way, you're diminishing any value it has. If you're to hold a religion for the rest of your life, the last thing it needs to be is a crutch.
The very values that have been stripped from Western nations by the left for the last 50 years gradually begin to make sense. I guess I considered myself an atheist since I was about 13. I rejected the religious teachings of my parents, who were both devout Catholics and quite conservative, and as I entered my teenage years, I began to become more liberal, and I believed that I could have all the answers, that science and secularism were adequate substitutes for religion and faith.
Anybody that tries to argue that science is a substitute for religion is committing a category error, and anytime that you commit that type of category error, you're going to end up venerating science past its scope. Religion and science deal with categorically different things. There may be some times where the two cross, especially when you get your young earth variants that try to say that their religion is a science. See Scat Towel's Science Falsely So-Called documentary. But science deals in the testable and the repeatable, and religion does not. There is a reason why people encounter epistemological problems whenever they try to move from having faith in religion to falling into a type of scientism. If you yourself tried to replace it in that way, I can see you encountering problems later on down the road. Science is a tool. It is a wonderful mechanism for discovering truth, but it is not in and of itself an epistemology.
But as I grew older, I also became more conservative, and I began to realize that the wisdom of my parents was based on something timeless, universal, and tried and tested for thousands of years, that the teachings of Christ were a set of rules and instructions that not only made intuitive sense when carefully studied, but actually had been essential in building and maintaining our Western civilization.
Wait, are you going to start saying that Christianity is responsible for the state of Western civilization? Yeah, I don't actually buy that. I will give credit where it's due. It does just so happen that the modern halls of academia that we utilize today were originally funded by the church. In this way, you can see Christianity as a foundational aspect, or more accurately, a vestigial one. It no longer serves its original purpose. Moreover, you're talking about the teachings of Jesus Christ. You are aware that the Pauline doctrines are usually what most of the foundations of Christianity are based on, right? And even without taking that particular bit of nuance into consideration, you also do realize that with the multiple denominations of Christianity that exist today, interpretation of those teachings isn't exactly intuitive, nor is it consistent. Also, intuition is literally the last thing you should be using when studying something. You should be using logic. Intuition is what seems to work best, or what seems to be consistent. Intuition is something that allows us to be pattern-seeking mammals. Intuition is also what tells you to be scared of the dark, even if your logic tells you there's absolutely nothing in the dark or under your bed. Intuition is often wrong.
While a decade ago I had buried myself in The Horseman, in my mid to late 20s watching Hitch, Harris, Dawkins and Dennett own religious apologists in debates time and time again, I had, however, dismissed all too quickly that the Horsemen were simply unable to adequately refute the claim that you cannot get an ought from an is.
Why would they have to refute the claim that you can get an ought from an is? Because you can't. The is-ought dilemma is a pretty classical problem. Moreover, the Four Horsemen did manage to start a cultural phenomenon, but their writings are incredibly base level. And in some cases, I would say that they're overtly bad. For instance, there are all kinds of philosophical problems with the moral landscape that Sam Harris proposes, and the God delusion in and of itself is a thoroughly unconvincing read if you're a theist, though I do recognize that there are outliers. On the flip side of Harris and Dawkins, though, Hitchens does make a very good case in Religion Poisons Everything, but he approaches this situation with a hammer as opposed to a scalpel, and that would be the biggest criticism I levy against him. This is coming from somebody who does like all of these people for different reasons. I just have my personal criticisms of all of them. Daniel Dennett is a topic for another day. That doesn't mean I'll necessarily be speaking ill or good of him. I just haven't wholly mapped out how I feel about Dennett personally. Anywho, my point is, if you mired yourself in their writings and their writings alone, then I can understand why a regression may have happened.
Science is the means by which we understand the physical world around us. It is not the means by which we derive our morality. For that, we need philosophy, metaphysics, religion. Human beings need relatable stories, instructions, parables, in order to develop a moral and ethical framework in which to live.
I'm going to go ahead and stop you there. While I do agree that we need philosophy in order to construct a consistent moral framework, even if you're not using an ivory tower academic version of philosophy, I disagree wholeheartedly that this conversation must inherently be religious. I know people who derive their morality from religion, and when you do so, you end up falling into the appeal to authority fallacy, especially if we're talking about Christianity. If the Bible's the authority on morality, then the Bible must be right, even when it is wrong. This causes a lot of consistency issues, whereas constructing your own moral framework allows you to tackle nuanced problems much better. As an example, again, I would point you to people like the NIFB. Many NIFB members become horrible people, not in spite of the teachings in the Bible, but as a direct result of them. If you yourself think that you've managed to create a consistent and good moral framework, then more power to you. But if you're going to try to apply this in a broad brush on the whole to multiple people, it's going to fail horribly.
Science and religion are actually not in conflict, as some atheists believe. They're not actually in competition.
And again, here I would have to agree with you. But are you aware that historically the science versus religion conversation has constantly come up as a direct result of religion's interference in science, even when it is funding it? This can be seen very plainly in the young earth creationist movement of the 20th century. A movement that is still going on now, includes several cults, and even has a theme park.
One is the means by which we understand the physical world around us. The other is the means by which we derive meaning and moral instruction. This system may even form the basis of a legal system or constitution for a nation-state to live by, but the core philosophy must be based upon something that cannot be altered or replaced by man-made ideals.
Oh boy, we are going to have a massive disagreement here. Like I said before, moral instruction is not necessarily derived from religion. Secondly, and most importantly here, if you're going to make an argument that a nation-state could be built off of the principles of a religion, you are right. But you are then advocating for a theocracy, and historically, those have been some of the most morally bankrupt institutions by modern standards. This is because there are religions that have condemnations for things like homosexuality, and if you have those written into law, and they cannot be changed because they are written into the religion, then you are going to be oppressing the minority groups in your society, and there will be no functional way out. It's only by removing the church from the state that you can then construct laws that are based on moral principles as opposed to being based on moral assertions from a book. But I haven't even addressed the elephant in the room of that particular argument. If you're going to say that something in a religion cannot be changed by man, then I would like you to look around at the world and see the literal thousands of religions that have spawned from Christianity alone. If you're going to argue that this religious doctrine is something that cannot be changed by man, then why is it that the one disagreement between all of the different Abrahamic faiths is one of doctrine? And if you want to try to make the case that Catholicism got it right and that's the difference, then you haven't just committed the category error fallacy and the scope error fallacy, you've also stepped into the no true Scotsman.
It's the idea that there is a higher power that man is answerable to, that governments and politicians cannot challenge.
And that must be why those laws are so consistent between all the denominations, right? Except they're not. Moving on.
That the state is beholden to the values and morals that the populace subscribe to.
And basing things on the values and morals that the populace ascribe to is another absolutely horrible way to try to build a legal structure for your citizens. You know, ignoring the fact that you literally just committed the argumentum ad populum fallacy. This one's not going to become a fallacy drinking game, everybody. I'd like my audience to survive the video. But when we appeal to the morality of the masses, we end up finding ourselves in cultures that think it's okay to behead a woman for trying to drive a car, or at the very least, giving her lashes. We find ourselves in societies that think that it's okay to rape a virgin in order to cure themselves of AIDS. We may even find ourselves in a society that think that it's okay to burn witches or stone homosexuals to death. These are all things that at one point in culture or another have been considered the populum's moral framework. This is why the fallacy doesn't hold, especially when trying to create a moral argument for a legal system.
This is one of the primary utilities of religion in our society.
The Irish Constitution, the preamble begins, "In the name of the most holy Trinity, in whom is all authority, and to whom, as our final end, all matters of men and of states must be referred." A very beautiful sentence. Now, Dave, you see, you can treat that as a kind of prayer, an invocation, if you want. And it has that appearance and feel. And I understand how non-religious people might kind of balk at that. And I always say this, when I was talking about it, I always say, look, I understand. I understand. But it's also something else. Apart from it, you can just back away from that fear you have, which is a natural kind of, maybe a resentment or a sense of,
Which sounds to me like a way of undermining any feelings that a non-religious person might have in having a state governed by religion.
And I say, it's something else. It's a mechanism to do something. And what is it? It's a mechanism to take the most fundamental rights of human beings and place them out of the reach of human beings, so they can't be interfered with. And that's how you protect human beings from tyranny.
I guess that's the reason why certain humans' inalienable right to life is constantly threatened by religious theocracies, or the right to love who one wants to love, or even the right to pursue happiness. These are things that I would pragmatically describe as human rights, and those human rights should only stop when they begin to violate another person's human rights, as opposed to the whims of a god whom you can't even demonstrate. Again, I have no issue with you believing in that god, but when you try to use that god as a framework for building out a theocracy, you're going to mire yourself in tons of moral problems, not the least of which is the different interpretations you can find of the doctrine. Some interpretations may allow for people to pursue happiness, but may not allow for homosexuals to exist in your society, as has been historically shown.
Nations and even empires that lose religion tend to collapse within a couple of generations. This is the pattern that John Glubb observed time and time again when he catalogued the rise and fall of great powers throughout history.
I know it's only an anecdote, but there is a conversation when dealing with Rome specifically and Christian values. The Edict of Milan legalized Christianity in 313, and it became the state religion in 380 AD. Afterwards, various popes managed to get their fingers in political affairs, which complicated governments of that society. While this take is widely criticized, Edward Gibbon was very famous for having his theory that Christianity may have actually had a hand in leading to the fall of the Roman Empire, due to the complication of governing matters. The other side of that argument would be that the fall of Rome was caused by military, economic, and administrative factors instead, but that conversation is still there nonetheless. I understand that this is only one instance, and anecdotes don't exactly make data, but it is one of the largest instances in history, and one of the most prolific. I would also like to point out that two of the least religious countries in the world, Denmark and Norway, also seem to have the highest happiness ratings amongst their citizens. But again, please do remember that these are all anecdotes. These are not meant to be sole refutations of your argument, these are meant to be examples of why your broad brush, ham-fisted approach doesn't work.
When an age of decadence is reached in a society, an age of liberalism follows. When you take God out of the equation, man tries to become God. Communism, which is once again trying to infiltrate every facet of our culture and compromise our institutions in the form of globalism, believes that the state is God, that it can be mother and father to an infantilized, powerless, and impoverished proletariat.
Alrighty, so we've gone from a ham-fisted approach that ignores all nuance to straight-up Alex Jones-level conspiracy theories about a new Red Scare and globalization. No, communism is not trying to infest literally every facet of Western society. Please, get your head out of Joseph McCarthy materials and come back to reality. For those who aren't aware, a globalist is someone who believes that ultimately all borders of all nations will be destroyed or dissolved eventually whenever a new world order or a one-world government is formed. And what tools are going to be used in order to bring about this globalization? Well, it's incredibly inconsistent. Every far-right conspiracy theorist has a different reason for it. Some will blame the feminists, some will blame racial minorities, and some will just straight up blame the Jews. Hell, Peter Sweden was famous for trying to say that there were people who were pulling the strings, and these people pulling strings behind the governments of multiple nations were ultimately the cause of bringing Muslims into various parts of Europe, in some effort to bring about a great replacement. The rabbit hole goes incredibly deep with this one, and I don't want to focus on it too much. But in short, it's a nutty conspiracy theory, and I may devote a video to it at another date.
It doesn't even matter if you believe in an afterlife or an interventionist god at all, or how the universe got started. These discussions are great fodder for theoretical debates, but they won't build or maintain a society. They won't protect against communism or indeed another outside religion that seeks to dominate the West.
It's Islam. He's talking about Islam, because the domination of the West from foreigners is basically no better than a dog whistle for right-wing fascists. I have a feeling that this person has maybe been watching too much Lauren Southern and Alex Jones.
Everything the left has done has been a gradual attempt to take people away from who and what they are and where they came from.
And that one's a straight-up nationalist dog whistle. I'm not going to say that that's exactly what it is, I'm just going to say that that's what it sounds like.
Christianity celebrates the vital importance of the family unit, the most powerful defense against an authoritarian state.
How? How exactly is the nuclear family model going to defend against an authoritarian state? Please, what part of simply having a nuclear family model is going to lead to the protection against a possible totalitarian government? I'll give you a hint. Absolutely nothing about the traditional family unit can do anything to stop a government from doing anything. This is some incredibly wishful thinking.
In Christianity, the roles of men and women are clearly defined, with great respect given to the unique roles of the mother and the father, and the importance of raising children in a set of values shared by other members of our community and tribe.
Ah yes, tribalism, that thing that was incredibly useful a couple thousand years ago, but is no longer that useful nowadays. Now all tribalism does is create harmful echo chambers and prevent people from understanding ideas that they might not have once considered. Tribalism is one of the main ways in which cults can form, by insulating the tribe against information and influence from other possible tribes. You can literally assert a totalitarian control over the tribe members. Moreover, there's no argument that says that men and women should adhere to these traditional family roles, unless you want to try to go full lobster Jordan Peterson style and argue that women are somehow happier as housewives. Some women might be happier as housewives. Some women might be happier pursuing a PhD and a career. Some men may be happier sitting at home and raising the children. And for anybody who happens to fall in between the two, you're already doing your own thing. Keep doing that. It makes this guy really angry.
The community building aspect of the religious service, the Mass, and the profession of faith ensure that everyone knows they are part of something bigger than themselves, that there's an authority beyond a democratically elected politician in office. This is how a nation-state is maintained.
No. This is how a nation-state can be maintained, but America functioned quite well for a long time before we ever threw under God into our Pledge of Allegiance. Moreover, this video is talking about how you found your way back to faith, but all that I've seen so far is you're talking about the usefulness of people believing in faith, not any evidence that it's actually about something that's true. Moreover, you've constructed an argument that necessitates an insulary mechanism against anybody who doesn't believe in this particular faith. An individual cannot become an atheist or a polytheist, or even one of the various types of monotheists that do not comport to your particular religious views under this particular set of circumstances. You seem to be arguing for something that is akin to groupthink for the masses in order to retain stability of a nation. And that sounds Orwellian at best.
By recognizing the value of the family. As you can see, it's not hard to understand why the leftist cultural Marxists have attacked religion and the family at every turn. This is what Yuri Bezmenov covered extensively in his lectures. The subversion of America, like many Western nations, has taken place by promoting hedonism, sexuality, drugs, and the obsession with materialism, individual rights, and individualism.
So, first of all, you're going to have to make an argument for why hedonism is a necessarily bad thing. I know a few hedonists, and I can't help but think that a society that has more of them would actually be a good thing. Small shout out to Inane Dragon. But again, I need to address the elephant in the room. You brought up a term, cultural Marxists. No doubt you've been dealing with a few of Peterson's lectures, or any of the other pseudo-intellectuals that think they know what the heck they're talking about. Cultural Marxism is another conspiracy theory. It's used to paint any progressive tendencies as secretly communist tendencies. The term roughly comes out to say that anybody in the left has infiltrated academia, media, and science in an incredibly concentrated effort to undermine Western culture. Most proponents of the cultural Marxist conspiracy theory think that all forms of liberalism are in fact communistic in nature, and that the liberalism is simply a front in which the communists hide behind. Literally, we're engaging in Red Scare shit again. Joseph McCarthy would be proud. But where did this originate? It actually originated in Nazi Germany, where cultural Bolshevism was used to abuse political opponents. Jewish citizens were accused of secretly trying to propagate communism into the society through the use of what was labeled Jewish Bolshevism. This undermining of Germany's values was undermined by promoting gender and sexual permissiveness. You know, some of those things that the left have classically fought for in the modern day. So when you try to make the argument that cultural Marxists are trying to take over Western civilization, you're literally just parroting Nazi propaganda. It's not even hyperbolically Nazi propaganda. This is literally something that history backs up. All you're doing is painting all the same terms with different names, but the internals of the words maintain the exact same meaning and the same potency. So congratulations, I would actually be justified in calling you a Nazi were I the type of person to do so. So let's goose step into the next part of your video.
Anything that gets people away from Christianity, settling down, starting a family, and raising their children in the value system of their ancestors. In Christian nations, the origin story of our culture is the birth of Christ. Now, even if you're not religious, even if you don't take the stories of Jesus literally, you can probably acknowledge that an origin story about the birth of a child and a savior born to bring peace to the world is a powerful message and a symbol of hope for future generations. But if people are encouraged to move away from Christianity, then they lose attachment to this story, and the origin story of who and what they are becomes rewritten.
Yeah, that's neat and all, but this sounds like a really feels over reals argument. You are literally arguing that regardless of what reality states, the feelings you personally get when thinking about the story of Christianity and Christ's birth must necessarily feel better to humanity as a race than any other origin story, whether true or not. Facts don't care about the feelings, and the only thing I'm hearing from you right now is a whole hell of a lot of feelings.
It's replaced with a focus on the worst moments in our history. This is why, in many modern liberalized Western nations nowadays, the native people are being encouraged to be ashamed of their past. In social justice-infested college courses in America, young Americans are brainwashed into self-loathing. They're encouraged to feel guilty for atrocities committed by their ancestors from hundreds of years ago. The same is true of many European nations. Their people are being encouraged to feel an intense sense of guilt and self-hatred for their colonial past, for example.
No, actually, last I checked, there isn't any self-loathing that comes from that. If we, as a society, have done shitty things in the past, then we ought learn about those when we're studying things like history. To gloss over those in the way that you're going to have to argue for to make your point work is to literally make an argument for revisionist history, and how that must be required in order to maintain civilization. Don't worry, my dude. Germany is fine.
So once the story we told ourselves about where we came from spiritually was based on the hope of a young child being born who could usher in a new age of peace for all humanity, now it's about negativity, despair, and hopelessness. You cannot build anything stable or successful on such foundations. On the theme of the birth of a child, third-wave feminism has promoted and attempted to normalize abortion.
Are you really gonna do... Oh my... Is this really where we're gonna go? Seriously, biblical gender roles couldn't stay away from the abortion issue for more than 10 seconds, and here you are jumping right into it. The idea that a woman should have integrity over her own body and be allowed to make a decision over who gets to use those particular facilities, whether it be a partner or a baby, says nothing about the story of Jesus Christ.
So the left has literally become like a death cult.
Did you just unironically call non-religious left-leaning people cultists that follow a death tradition? Please, remind me again what the crowning achievement in Christianity is supposed to be? That whole human sacrifice thing that leads to the salvation of mankind? And the fact that Christianity literally began as a mystery cult? You just unironically projected.
You see, although the promotion of left-wing ideology is ultimately about power, it's also not quite as simple as a straightforward attack on conservatism. It's an attack on Christianity that goes back as far as the crucifixion of Christ.
So the left was fighting with Christianity before Christianity was even codified as a religion? Do you live with the tinfoil hat on? I've heard no less than 3 conspiracy theories from you so far, and I'm sure there are some that I've missed.
Getting people away from their Christian heritage and values, disconnecting people from God, and making them docile and compliant by promoting distractions that placate the masses.
Distractions that placate the masses, you are aware that that is something that religion classically does, right? There's a reason why when Marx wrote about religion, he specifically called it the opium of the masses. You've quite literally projected everything that your religion is and does onto the left as a whole. And you've done it in such a broad brush, ham-fisted way that I can only assume that you have no idea what you're talking about. But your video is about 23 minutes long, and I've already spent a crap ton of time in it so far. I hate to do this to you guys, but I'm gonna have to save part 2 for this Friday. Also, this video is one of the ones that was suggested to me when I asked for a video to do earlier in the week, so thank you very much for that. But now I'm gonna go bleach my brain in a few games of League of Legends. It sounds like I'm listening to a slightly more articulate Alex Jones. So with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my breakdown of this video so far, and I hope you all are looking forward to part 2, which I'll tackle this Friday. Thank you all for watching, everyone, and please hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon, check the Patreon link and all that other fun stuff. As we move into the Patreon slides, insert end of video tagline here.